Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. My name is Serge. Joining me today, I have a Wheeler.
What up?
And a Nelly.
Present.
A reminder that everything we do is brought to you by you with your support of the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part one of our Lost Caverns of Ixalan set review. Today we're going to be covering white, blue, and black cards. Reminder for our set reviews that they are not exhaustive. We're not talking about all the cards, only the ones that we think are relevant to the format or might make a splash. And also, we have some select cards from the Commander product as well that we also think are cool and good. And without further ado, Wheeler, start us off.
Charismatic Conqueror. 1 and a white for a 2/2 vampire soldier with vigilance. Whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped under an opponent's control, they may tap that permanent. If they don't, you create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So this has two relevant words on it, vampire and soldier. I'm going to use this as an example that we are not going to talk about every single vampire card.
Sure.
Because, you know, there's a lot of them. It's Ixalan. So we have picked a couple of vampires to talk about, like their inclusion in the vampire archetype, which does exist. Shout out to AI Amethyst, one of the
Premier vampire pilots
premier
of the
vampire
format.
pilots of the format. And this card is relevant for that deck because it's a 2-drop. And vampires, much like other emergent types and theme decks, they really struggle on the low end.
Yeah.
Like comparatively, goblins, elves, and even zombies has a lot more 1s and 2s that really let those decks thrive a bit more, and Merfolk as well. Merfolk was, as a premier Merfolk pilot, but we don't have to get to that. Let's talk about this card. So it's a 2-mana creature that's easy to cast, only a single pip, and it has a relevant combat-related ability in Vigilance, and a relevant, hey, maybe your thing comes in tapped. Maybe you don't get to combo off. It is a bit of like a Punisher mechanic. Yeah. Your opponent gets the choice, so that's not great. But again, we're just looking for density. This goes for soldiers as well. Soldiers needs more help than vampire. Actually, I don't even know if that's true.
I think it's true.
They're about I think they're about the same.
I would way rather battle you on soldiers than Angel on vampires.
Wow, that's messed up. Okay, great. I know what's coming to a new North 100
Yeah,
showdown.
yeah.
But yeah, this is fine. This is the kind of card that you want more of to help reinforce vampires as an archetype. Just 1s and 2s with relevant abilities that are easier to cast.
All right, I got two quick questions for you.
Sure.
One, on the topic of vampires, where is it right now? Like a tier 1.5? Like is cards like this helping it get more competitive, or is it still not quite there?
It's helping it get more competitive, and there are a lot of them. Like,
yes.
We'll talk about this when we get to Merfolk too,
Sure.
but basically any vampire or Merfolk we talk about, you can just add them to your deck.
They're just upgrades.
It's just card quality is a lot higher nowadays. But I don't know. It's like a rising. What is it? Rising tide raises all the ships.
Yeah.
So sets like this are going to be like, oh, vampires got better.
Yeah.
But so did Merfolk.
Sure.
So now, why am I playing?
Right, but I mean, compared to traditional tribes, like obviously we have elf and goblin up at the top, and then zombies like just below there, and we've been watching the rise of vampire and merfolk for a bit now.
I think after this set, vampires is going to be kind of in the same spot as far as the typal, and as far as typal hierarchy goes.
Sure.
Merfolk is the one that's the big winner.
The big beneficiary, that's fair.
Yeah, but it does make this a more reasonable thing to play against other decks, right?
All right, and then the follow-up question, is this card good enough for like D&T or mono white aggro with its ability to go wide?
No,
Okay.
it's a card from the Vampire Commander deck, and I would recommend playing it in your Vampire Canlander deck or Soldiers.
Well, I just want to point out, worth noting, it doesn't say non-token. So, like, there's going to be situations where this card does a ton of work.
Yeah?
Right?
Yeah.
But also agree with.
We're not cutting Thalia or anything? All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Next up, Nelly.
We've got Dauntless Dismantler. 1 and a white for a 1/4 human artificer. Artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. Hey, and it also says XX white.
Exile
Sacrifice
Wheeler.
this card. Destroy each artifact with mana value X. So just Just a really hateful card against eggs in a white 2-drop with 4 toughness for some reason.
It's a 1/4.
Yeah, no, they just keep making these. This one possibly good enough for D&T. Like, it does blow up something, so it's like not. I don't like this card as a mainstay as much as the green werewolf that blows up an artifact, but it does. You get everything coming in tapped and have 4 toughness and only 2 mana.
How you doing there, Wheeler?
So I know that when I say this, people are going to think, "Oh, he's trying to bait us into not including this card
Oh, you think
in
this
our
one's not
decks."
good?
I just think that this style of card is not strong enough for Death and Taxes, and yet people will still play it.
Yeah.
Mostly because it doesn't have the pressure associated, like a 1/4
1/4.
body.
Yes. Yeah.
And the artifact decks that do, like artifact decks have started to run more removal, but they run them in the form of like portable hole
Right.
Sure.
or player removal.
Yep.
Killing you with Kappa Cannoneer, and friends, which this can't actually touch.
If I may very quickly, one advantage over this over a lot of traditional D&T things is this is not symmetrical.
Yeah.
Where the cost of inclusion is a lot lower compared to, I mean, the classic example would be Collector Oof or something, right? Of just like, hey, this shuts down everything. It's like, well, this doesn't hose your side. Like, it doesn't hose your mock straws or anything.
Yeah, this is a top 8 card is what I like to categorize this as, where don't play this at your weeklies.
But bring
because
it
it's just, you're going to have this against like a Jeskai player and they'll be like, oh, so I'm only taking 1 a turn? Great. But if you have like a league going on and you know there are going to be artifact pilots, this is like of high enough card quality that you can slide it in to your deck.
Help me workshop a joke here. I started with Ronim Unicorn Glow Up. but
That
that's
an
a
enchantment.
2-mana
Serge.
2/2. I thought it would sacrifice a destroy target artifact or enchantment.
No, it's
Is
a
it
destroy
just
target enchantment.
Okay, well, this joke sucks.
Yeah, but that's never stopped you before.
All right, let's just move on then.
Someone had to say it.
Next up, another vampire. What? The Dusk Rose Reliquary is not a vampire?
No.
Oh, this one. I'm sorry. The Dusk Rose Reliquary. 1 mana artifact. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. It has Ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. I mean, this is what Wheeler was talking about with Portable Hole, where you've got these really excellent, really tutorable artifact removal. This has Ward 2, which makes it a lot easier to sort of get around. And one of the nice things is with your Urza Saga, you don't have to... Does Urza Saga cast it or just put it into play?
It puts it into play, but important to note that you skipped on, this costs a white mana. This is a 1 mana white
Oh,
card.
pardon me.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't actually get it off Urza Saga.
Right, because Urza Saga specifically demands that you find an artifact with mana cost 0 or 1, right?
Oh, it's not mana value.
It's
I thought... Oh!
Urza Saga is
well,
a really weird card.
My evaluation of this was sort of centered around that. I mean, this is still really cool and really powerful. It is another tutorable artifact removal thing for the artifact decks that want to get around stuff. And the fact that it has Ward 2 makes it quite strong. I am sad about that loss of the Urza Saga evaluation. Where do you put this on the Portable Hole ranking then? The Ward 2 makes it better. The additional cost in the White Pit makes it worse.
Let's just get our Portable Hole power ranking.
Yeah.
The Hole deals with Oof,
Yep.
which is the most important one,
Yeah.
and stuff like Thalia. This deals with anything. That's it. That's my evaluation.
Sure.
But Hole, like, this card is good, but it's not going to be as ubiquitous, I think, as Hole.
Yeah.
I'd play it in the Welder decks or like the blue-white artifact mid-range decks, like Davey B brought to the 2022 top 8.
Yeah, the additional cost is a little tough, but kind of incidental, especially if you're trying to remove basically anything. I do think I prefer it in ways that you can sort of slip it into play.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is Portable Hole currently? I was just looking at one of your eggs decks from like last week or something. You posted that you were jamming eggs on a stream.
Yeah.
Did you have Portable Hole in that one? Because I know you had like some spell bombs.
I play Portable Hole in the more traditional eggs variant and in Paradox Academy.
Do you think that this makes this kicks out Portable Hole in those decks? Or
No.
Okay. Even in decks where you have some artifacts that like going to the graveyard, this is a very specific removal spell.
It
It's only going
really
to
is.
fit to
Yeah.
a few archetypes.
It's so easy to look at the first line of text and be like, oh, well, you have tokens lying around.
Right.
You have things that you want to put in the graveyard, but it's a removal spell. So what if you don't?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you really need to get
Yeah.
rid of the thing.
Especially early game for early interaction, right?
Yeah.
Which is when like if you're popping off, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's when you need it most.
Card's not bad. It's just I think you need to play this in a deck that wants to use this as like aggressively. Like
Right,
get rid of your thing so I can hit you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Wheeler.
Helping Hand. 1 white sorcery. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I'm going to ruin so many evenings with this card. This is one of my favorite effects in the game is the white return
Yeah.
small creatures from the graveyard to play. We've gotten quite a bit of these.
They've been pushing them lately.
Yes,
like,
they've really
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
I do like the design space of putting this in white over in black.
Right.
It just
That's
feels
kinda
more
had its
fitting.
moment. Sure.
And yeah, the 2 mana, I've tried builds with the 2 mana ones, Recommission and Triumphant Return, and they are serviceable. They're good. They do what you want them to do. I think this card just makes me want to cut those two and only play this one because it's just such a high value play. And it doesn't matter if you get into play tapped because you're not dealing combat damage to me anyways, or I'm gaining a bunch of life when I return my like Welcoming Vampire or my Bygone Bishop or whatever. I don't think this card is going to see play in like a mono white Death and Taxes style deck. And in something like Sandy B or Pattern Rector combo, you do have access to black in those decks, and so you have access to something more flexible like Reanimate.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if this could be in like Naya Double Strike, just because like if you could play this instead of one of your like less like not your top tier creatures, and then just like get one of your top tier creatures back. I'm trying to think if there's a other.
I mean,
I love it in Ruin Your Ego.
Top tier is
It's like-
tough though, just because it's mana value 3 or less. Like I think I'm preferring Savine's Wreck in that sort of situation still.
Well,
just
the
for
creatures are all
flexibility.
cheap, yeah, in that deck.
Yeah. All right, next up, Nelly.
It's time to talk about Kutzil's Flanker. 2 and a white for a 3/1 Cat Warrior with Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, choose one. Put a +1/+1 counter on this for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. Really interesting templating there. Or you gain 2 life and scry 2, or exile target player's graveyard. Okay, so a Flash 3/1, not flying, sort of hate bear. Does this make the cut in Death and Taxes? I don't imagine that warriors or cats are going to be kind of on the menu. It does exile a player's graveyard. There's a lot of value in doing that. It has 3 power. Is there some combo to play with the first ability? I don't actually see putting this in the deck myself.
it's a cat that still dies to Dark Blast.
Yeah.
That's pretty rude.
I like this basically only in like blue-white flash or like sort of a tempo-y sort of thing where you're just trying to act as much in your opponent's end step. And the flexibility and sort of gotcha potential is nice. And the first ability, the first choice is something you typically only see in green or black. You have the one which is like make zombies for every creature that died, or
Right.
there's that werewolf which gets bigger or something like that for every creature that died or something like that.
I wonder if this is like secretly kind of hot in Bant Blink, right? Because if you cast one of the mass blink spells, like we're not talking about tier 1 decks here, but if you in Canadian Highlander, if you're just like Lazel's Acrobatics, and then like this comes back in and it's just like an 8/5 or whatever, that's maybe sweet.
I mean, even just an end step turn 3 gain 2 scry 2 is fine, but it needs to be in the right deck. It really needs to be in the right deck.
I think we're stretching fine a little bit.
A
there
little
by
bit. We might be
20
overstretching on this
Yeah.
one.
I think you two need to start respecting yourselves a little more and playing better cards.
That's fair.
I really like the experience of playing Bant Blink, even if I lose. Like,
Yeah.
it's just fun. So
Yeah,
I'll play
right.
it. And like sometimes you win. Like it, I don't know. It's worth my time.
I like Bant Blink. I think
Yeah.
it's genuinely a reasonable deck that has gotten better, especially
Yeah.
with the initiative.
it's like
but
a solid tier 2 or
but
1.5
it's
strategy,
just
right?
awkward because this just already like Bant Blink already has access to
Sure.
this
Charming
kind of
Prince,
stuff, and
yeah.
it doesn't really need like you'd win with that deck through concession.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Just people be like, well, you have 8 cards in hand and I can't keep anything in play.
Yeah.
I guess I'm conceding.
All right. Well, I'll move on then to the Thousand Moons Smithy. This is a 4-mana legendary artifact for 2 white. When it enters the battlefield, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts and/or creatures that you control. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may tap 5 untapped artifacts and/or creatures you control. If you do, transforms the smithy to the Barracks of the Thousand, which is a legendary artifact land, taps for white, and whenever you cast an artifact or creature spell using mana produced by the Barracks of the Thousand, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. So this makes better constructs, and then it flips and it turns into an artifact land that makes more better constructs. This is really good.
This is a card. Yeah.
This is so cool. And now I know what some of you are thinking. It's 2 and then a colorless pip. So is Urza. I mean, obviously Urza's like pretty broken for other reasons as well, but like it immediately comes into play, gives you a large threat, and then gives you an engine to keep producing it. And why is the land also an artifact? This is so good. This also further grows your creatures. Mm-hmm. So my only question about this is, where are we putting it? Now, Urza Saga is a very low cost of inclusion. A lot of decks are able to get a lot of value out of the constructs. This is 4 mana, which is a little bit tough. The double white pip makes it not necessarily a natural shoo-in for like a lot of the blue decks, but we got the blue-white artifact list. I think that's super easy there. I think I'd try this in red-white equipment stuff.
Interesting.
But Wheeler, you look like you're about ready to jump in.
I like your inclusion in equipment just because it means transforming it's kind of extra easy. You tap your equipment in your pre-combat main.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this in honestly probably Paradox. Like I just think it plays defense so well, and then maybe white X token decks. But there's a deck you played earlier this year that I bet you want to talk about.
Yeah, I don't understand the hesitation when it comes to like colored pips of mana in these decks, because we have Moxen, we have plenty of fetches, artifact lands, triomes. Like colored mana is not that big of an issue as it used to be. I'm jamming this in Welder and in basically any of the artifact mid-range decks. I'm not a fan of this in Paradox or the combo versions just because it's a little slow. And like it only has it has some defensive potential in that you make a big thing that can block, but it is like this is a board-based card through and through. And so I want to play this in a deck that's looking to build to the board and kill my opponent with permanents on the board that I turn sideways to attack, you know?
Man, I really like this in that blue-white artifact deck. The more I think about it, I'm just like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I forget which set review it was, but I said something along the lines of like, I think one of the best things that you can do in Canadian Highlander is make as many constructs as possible. Yep. And this is a card that can do that and does it better than the Commander deck Urza that I think was what initially spawned this.
James, can we flip back to the other side really quickly? Yeah, legendary artifact. Mm-hmm. You know what's best friends with this? Oswald Fiddlebender.
Ooh.
Right? Like, I think this is not quite what you're looking for Tinker or something like that, but if you're already playing Oswald, I think this is a great sort of... It's weird to think of like a pod chain line, but if you're trying to find ways to put this out really quickly...
This fits really well with Welder because of the ETB.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not cast, which is pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And those decks generate a lot of artifacts, like tokens off your Saheeli or your Sai, or you're just playing baubles and stuff that you don't have to cash in. Yeah, this card's... I'm going to kill a lot of people with this.
Yeah, just to take the temperature here, like, do we all agree that, like, this is probably going to be a mainstay? Like, this seems like a very important Canadian Highlander card?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I still feel it's maybe a little bit more niche.
It's a bit niche, obviously.
Like, I mean, in that, I don't think it's going to be as ubiquitous as like Urza Saga, which every deck is running. Like this is going to be in. I think every deck that plays artifacts is going to like this, but I don't think you're just going to be splashing it into any white deck that doesn't already necessarily synergize.
Well, I think it's important to remember though it can synergize with artifacts or it can just synergize with creatures.
Yeah, it's like a Keldon Warlord plus a Nettle Cyst style card.
Yeah.
Yeah, glad I picked something. Not Nettle Cyst, Brood Star. There we go. Okay. Keldon Warlord and Brood Star.
Just the two most well-known Magic cards.
Yeah,
for
I
the
bet
audience.
you everybody in chat knows exactly what those look like. Chat, or you know what I mean. All right, shall we move on to blue?
Sure.
Wheeler.
Akal Pakal, first among equals. 2 and a blue for a 1/5 legendary creature, Human Advisor. At the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the other into the graveyard. This is it's an appealing card to look at and be like, wow, I'm going to draw so many cards off this, but I don't think it has a home, unfortunately, in any of the artifact decks. Yeah, it's a legend without an ETB. It's a legend without an immediate payoff, too. Like, they can just kill this in the main phase. With something like Psy, which this has a lot
That was going to compare this to Psy. I just realized end step. That's the end step.
So, Psy also suffers from getting Caracas, but you get priority.
You at least have a
before
chance to cast an artifact. immediately.
Exactly. Yeah. Not to mention that builds to the board, which, like, a lot of these artifact decks, the cards that you think of that actually win you the game and let you survive until you get your combo, Psy, Master Thopterist, Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, they're all cards that just poop out more artifacts. And those artifacts can either attack or block. You know, they do a whole bunch. They make your academy bigger. This just lets you get more cards, which is not something that these decks struggle with. So it's a card that looks appealing. It's got a big ass, and it's easy to cast. But I just don't think it's doing enough for what you're looking to do with these artifact decks, even the grindier like Welder or just Academy Ramp style deck.
Yeah. All right.
Not an artifact, but one more time for that ass.
1/5? Jesus.
3 mana?
All right, let's move on.
Let's talk
Nelly.
about Deep Root Pilgrimage. Hey, we mentioned earlier that Merfolk were the big winning type from the set. It's 1 and a blue for an enchantment that reads, whenever one or more non-token Merfolk you control become tapped, create a 1/1 Merfolk creature token with hexproof. So there's an obvious comparison here. I think we should just let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's Merfolk Bitter Blossom, right? You don't get them immediately in your upkeep, but as long as things are going reasonably, you're getting, one extra Merfolk token every combat. And then also there's some like shenanigans you can probably play. I'm looking at you, Marrow Regery.
Oh, and like Pure Sight Mentor.
Yeah,
whatever.
Maybe just read.
Yeah.
Sure.
No.
People know what we're talking about. Just think we're waving here as we're doing the tap untap really quick.
Tappy, yeah. No, you could go deeper if you really want to with this card, but in our format, you only get one copy of each card in your deck. So I just like playing the cards that are good, whether or not you draw their best friends.
That's not true.
I just like playing the cards that are good. Full stop.
Yeah.
Wheeler's like, no, that's stop kidding yourself. I don't know. This seems like a slam dunk in Merfolk, obviously, and not in any other decks. I'm not sure how much more I need to say about it.
Yeah, nailed it.
Okay.
All right, next up, we have the Kite Sail Larcenist. 3 mana, 2/3 human pirate for 2 and a blue. It has flying and ward 1. And when it enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to 1 other target artifact or creature that they control. For as long as Kite Sail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts they become a treasure.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. And I like that it's for each player. So inexplicably, if you needed to ramp on your side or if you wanted to get rid of something, you could do something to your board as well, make treasure. This is awesome. This is a... not the Oblivion Ring. 3 mana creature that comes into play in Exiles. Fiend Hunter. It's kind of like a Fiend Hunter. It's neat in that like they can get a little bit of value if they want to sack it for a mana later on, and like really good players will find moments when that's relevant. Also, it's a 2/3 flyer with ward 1. This is awesome. You know what I want to play this with? Any deck with Aether Vial.
Ancient
and that
mana.
ancient 2 mana.
I just want to throw out for any of our audience members who might find this card super confusing, because it is usually, if an effect
gives says this becomes this type of card, like it becomes an artifact, that means usually that it loses its other type. So just so it's clear,
Oh,
you
yeah.
cast this, you target their creature, like your Sarah Angel now isn't a creature anymore, so loses abilities. Yes, if it had Vigilance, it doesn't have that anymore, but it also isn't a creature, so it can't attack.
It's just a treasure token.
It's literally it turns it into a treasure.
Kind of like how Oko turns something into an elk.
Right.
Right? You just
Yeah.
if it helps you visually, just take an actual treasure token
Yeah.
and cover your permanent with it.
Yeah.
No, this is absolutely fantastic. If you are I don't really think there's a white blue D&T list, but
Humans.
yeah.
I like this in Esper humans
Yeah.
or maybe Jeskai humans. That's a little less explored.
Yeah.
But Esper humans being a deck where you just want as many evasive, really annoying 2-drops and 3-drops. to play.
Proactive disruption.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess this is kind of reactive, but you know what I mean,
I
right?
wonder if this is good enough to
'cause-
get into Sultai mid-range control.
Maybe in the old school,
Is this a Blake card?
No.
All right.
I was gonna say maybe years ago I could see this picking up a GT, but I think modern. I don't think that deck was looking for this
Okay.
anymore.
Humans only.
Yeah, I think you need to for a card like this, you kind of need to take advantage of a couple of the words on the card, and coordinate them with other stuff.
You mean the tribes?
Well, not necessarily that. A Sultai mid-range deck, this is disruptive, but it's also a 3-drop that's only a 2/3 without flash or
Yeah,
anything.
no flash, no
And
haste.
so
Yeah.
it the card when Sultai, if a Sultai mid-range deck is playing a 3-drop at sorcery speed, it's usually something like Leovold.
Yeah, I was gonna
right?
say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or Oko.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
yeah.
But that's just how much I value this set of words.
Yeah.
It answers
it's
a
not a
lot.
4/4 for 3 or anything.
It answers a lot.
Yeah. It's good, but it also needs your opponent to have something for it to be worth it, you know?
It's you're right. It's not that proactive.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
fair.
fair enough.
All right. Let's move on. Wheeler.
Sure. Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel. 1 in a blue for a 2/1 legendary creature, Siren Pirate, with flash flying. And whenever Malcolm deals combat damage to a player, you put a chorus counter on it. Draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 4 or more chorus counters on Malcolm, you may cast the exile or the discarded card without paying its mana cost. So you had me at 2 mana, 2 power flash flyer.
It's legendary.
Yeah. It loots on hit, and then if you've hit them enough with this card, you just get to cast something for free.
Are you playing this in Reanimator?
It doesn't even matter if it's a fresh card off the top that you're casting for free. It's any card from your hand. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll keep
No,
going. Yeah,
I'm playing
sorry.
this in Flying Men.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
And I might even play it, not that I play blue-green tempo anymore, but I could see this show up in blue-green because if you, this card has, I mean, again, the floor is that it's just flash 2 power flying. Great. It also loots on hit, which those decks tend to like to have access to. But then you benefit the most off this card when you develop 1 threat and then try to protect it, or just try to let it rock for most of the game. And those are 2 archetypes that excel. Those are 2 archetypes that do that, right? Flying Men, getting this card down is your only threat, and then just protecting it with your counter magic eventually will lead you to getting a payoff where you get to cast another threat for free. So, yeah. This card's pretty good.
Go with me on this Reanimator journey now, though.
Okay.
Is that too greedy?
Yeah.
Sure.
You prefer your old school looters as opposed to the ones that actually have to connect?
Yeah, I think as the looters in Reanimator 2, the old school variants of just they sit around and tap to loot, have actually gotten better in the past year with Vohar and Likeness Looter. And they do those cards do additional things relevant to that archetype, whereas this is just hey, I'm a looter il core with wings.
I think it's worth noting too that it fits in better with decks that are trying. Their main purpose is to attack with the medium-sized creatures. Because if this comes down next to some other flyers and they have a flyer, maybe you're still going. But in the Reanimator deck, you just have this trying to.
I'm too greedy. Okay, that's fine.
Great card, though.
Very cool card. Let's move on.
Let's talk about Erazka Puzzle Door. For 1 blue mana, you get an artifact with 1 activated ability that says, pay a generic, tap, and sacrifice this. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and 1 into the graveyard. Okay, so what is this? It's Surveil 2. What's the name of the Surveil 2 card? And then draw a card?
Discovery.
Discovery. It's like Surveil
Curate.
2. Or no, one always has to go in your graveyard and 1 has to go in your
This
hand.
is this is like updated sleight of hand.
Yeah, it's like sleight of hand, but instead of the bottom, it goes into your graveyard.
This is to sleight of hand as consider is to opt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but it's on a rock for 1 blue. So, but it costs 1 mana. So I'm confused. What type of food is this?
It's not
Is
an
it
egg or nuts.
Is it an egg?
It's egg.
It is an egg.
I thought an egg had to replace itself with a mana.
No, an egg is just a 1 mana artifact that has to replace itself.
Oh, I thought that was like a free
by
mana
putting-
generation.
No, my dear boy. This needs to just simply put itself into the graveyard. and
Oh.
the
replace
first set
itself
of
that
eggs
way.
also made mana. Like they all
Yes.
made mana. and a
Sure.
card,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But this one makes a card, but it loots. Sorry, not loots. It digs further. You get your favorite card into your hand and your favorite card into the graveyard of the top 2. And so I imagine it's going to definitely be a consideration for eggs, just pure card drawing egg.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
There's like a flex slot that Brainstone kind of filled. That
Yeah, I
now
was going to
this
say
card-
Brainstone's kind of expensive, right? So,
Yeah, it's pricey. This getting to put something into the graveyard is huge.
Also, like maybe your welder decks. Any of the blue?
Yeah, I don't
welder
hate it
decks,
for
maybe?
welder just because I mean the welder decks also don't care about the blue cost on this. Eggs can kind of care if this
Right.
is like your egg that you're looping with, because then you need to have you can't just like KCI loop with
Yes.
this. You need to throw in a lotus or a lotus petal or something as well. But yeah, I'll give this a shot. I'll
Cool.
combo with this card.
Yeah.
Sweetie pie.
Next up, Spyglass Siren. 1 mana, 1/1 Siren Pirate for a single blue pip. Has flying. When it enters the battlefield, create a map token. And we haven't covered map tokens
What's a
yet
map
now.
token, Serge?
Well, we got a new artifact token alert. Weep, boo. So map tokens are pay 1, tap, sacrifice this artifact. Target creature you control explores. Activate it only as a sorcery. And Explore is reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature spell, you may leave it on top of your library or put it in your graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter. And if it's a land, you can put it into your hand. What did I get wrong?
You said non-creature spell.
Sorry, if
You
it's a
reveal the-
non-land.
Yeah, you reveal the top. If it's a land, you draw it. If it isn't, you can leave it on top or put it in the graveyard, and a 1/1 counter gets placed on the creature
Yeah.
that explores.
So it's pretty cool. This is going into Flying Men.
Card's great.
Yep.
Arguably one of the best flying men of all time.
Fantastic flying.
Yeah.
card
It
right
is.
here.
It is
Yeah.
absurdly good.
Also, the +1/+1 counter in that deck doubles your creatures. It's what a
Yeah.
clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime you get a cheap, like I might even consider this in the artifact aggro deck. Like it's
It's kind of like a Thraben Inspector.
I was about to say
Yeah,
Thraben
it's in the
Inspector,
Thraben
yeah.
Inspector Voldaren Epicure
Yeah,
line
yeah.
of like
But it has
cards
flying.
that always get undervalued initially.
Yes.
And then they show up and you're like, oh.
Thraben Inspector
Yeah.
might be my like all-time like longest curve of like I just kept thinking the card was better the following year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I started off being like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. And then 5 years later, it was like, oh, all the pauper decks play this.
This is going to be super funny if this is like Sleeper, the best card in the set.
I mean, it
Then
does
everyone's
have a
like,
bunch.
actually,
I think
that's pretty good, but
I think
yeah.
there's a lot of heat in this set. I don't know if it's going to hit that, but
No,
this,
no,
this
no.
will hopefully get people to, give these cheap cards a second evaluation.
Mm.
Anytime a 1 mana card produces 2 permanents, that's pretty good. If one of those permanents is an artifact, that's even
yeah.
better. And then
Yeah.
if the first one is an evasive threat, like that's wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on, Wheeler.
We have the Ever-Flowing Well, 2 and a blue for a legendary artifact. With when it enters the battlefield, you mill 2 cards and then draw 2 cards, and then descend 8. So descend is a new keyword ability word.
It's
I forget-
ability word,
Ability
yeah.
word. Yeah. That says at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you transform the Ever-Flowing Well. So descend 8, referring to the 8 or more permanent cards. And then the Everflowing Well transforms into the Myriad Pools, a legendary artifact land that taps data blue and says whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by the Myriad Pools, up to one other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn. There's a camera in the way. So admittedly, I added this card to the list because it's an artifact that just draws on ETB, which we don't have many of those.
I'm trying to rack my brain for other artifacts that draw 2 on ETB.
Yeah, it drawing 2, and it's not attached to a body. Like you have like Sky Scanner and Friends.
Right. Yeah. There's the
2-mana well, Mycosynth Well.
that draws 1 when ETB is 1 when it
and when it dies, yeah.
That's
but
Ichor Wellspring.
Ichor Wellspring.
Wellspring.
Thank
Not
you,
to-
yeah.
There's the Muldrifter
Boys.
with Affinity.
Yeah.
Boys,
You got this?
we're talking about artifacts that draw cards.
Okay, all right.
Let the master work.
We'll let him cook. We'll let him cook.
Let me
All
cook.
right.
Let me cook. So this is a bit more expensive than your average nut. Nuts being the 2-mana artifacts that draw a card and when they ETB and tend to put themselves in the
Oh,
graveyard.
yeah, tell me more.
But
Don't say that to him.
I will.
I'm lucky there's no horses in this set.
I'm considering this in the welder decks. I want to kind of revisit some of the welder decks that go a bit bigger and more controlling. The welder archetype is very kind of condensed, playing little eggs and getting kind of incremental advantage. But I'm curious about expanding into more like bring back. I mean, not Sundering Titan, but maybe Sundering Titan. There are a lot of Triomes around. You know, more Duretti kind of effects, more Trash for Treasure style cards. And this is a card that fills your graveyard, draws you more cards, and that if it goes, it just sits around that you can convert into something bigger. And if the game goes a little longer, it just turns into something that'll get to accelerate your mana and start copying some pretty gross cards. It's not a slam dunk, but it's got enough interesting aspects that make me like it gets the old ticker going, you know? No, ticker.
Yeah.
It gets my heart's palpitating.
There was a really interesting list that you brought a while ago that was like medium blue artifact. It still played Workshop into like Kappa Cannoneer.
Oh, like battle bots?
Kind of like, yeah, like a more blue focused battle bots. It doesn't play all the Mem Knights and like the super fast thing like I used to do, but just like mid-range battle bots. I'm trying to think. Like I like this, especially the other half.
Yeah.
When you're like 2 Kappa Cannoneers.
I know that I started off this by clarifying the difference between a nut and an egg.
Yeah.
But I think Academy lists in our format would gain a lot from players, myself included, being less pedantic regarding like the classification.
Sure.
Because honestly, you take Tolarian Academy and enough fast mana and you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter how you do it.
Yeah.
And it's really unexplored. It's
Even
just
Nelly
like,
can win games with that strategy.
I mean, to give Nelson credit, which is a rare occasion on this podcast, I think Nelson actually cracked the code quite a while ago with your like Academy ramp, but you were just like casting like 5 drops and 6 drops.
Yeah, it was like the mid-range control. That was like my original Tezzeret.
Yeah.
Boldest
Yeah,
deck.
OG like Tezzerator. That's
Yeah,
something.
that deck fit into the 10 years ago metagame really well.
Yes,
Yeah.
and get this.
Yeah.
Triple Mox Academy is still really good.
What?
Or like Ring like
Ring Mox.
Soul Ring, Mox, Mana Vault, Tolarian Academy, like just fast mana plus this. Explore, test them out, you know?
I can't leave talking about this card until I bring up, you know what, completely forgotten archetype. This is 1,000% a slam dunk in. It's not any of the ones we've talked about yet.
What is it?
Mono Blue Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah.
It does everything the Mono Blue Seinfeld
Does that
wants
deck
to do.
play
Does
more
it
than
have-
8 permanents?
Does it have permanents? That's what I was about to
No,
say.
it
Like,
does.
what does the other half
plays
do?
Mana Rocks. It does. It plays Mana Rocks. But it's fine with just the front side.
It just wants the front side. This is just divination that turns into a land.
Buddy,
maybe.
I almost played that Flash Divination in the deck recently.
Yeah.
Like, it is.
Divination's actually not that bad.
All right.
A lot of what our cards do, like they end up kind of being fancy divinations. sometimes.
Sure,
Yeah.
fair
Like
enough.
modal divination or whatever. Yeah.
All right, bring us home with the last blue card, please, Nelly.
It's Tishana's Tidebender, 2 and a blue for a 3/2 Merfolk Wizard with Flash that says, when Tishana's Tidebender enters the battlefield, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as Tishana's Tidebender remains on the battlefield. What the F? Like, oh, I forgot to counter your Planeswalker. Let me just do it after it's in play. Like, this card is mean and oppressive in a kind of Hull Breacher fashion, although much like more niche.
Hull Breacher, also Merfolk.
Yeah,
worth
that's right.
mentioning.
Hull Breachers,
They're best friends.
Hull Breacher ruins everybody. Tishana's Tidebender ruins like a few specific people, but like, yeah, this card is mean and awful. I'm glad it doesn't say enchantment or land on it. So like, your survival of the fittest is still safe, but like,
So why I like this is Merfolk, as the premier Merfolk pilot of the format.
Nope.
Merfolk has a problem of catching up when it's behind.
Right.
It applies a lot of pressure and it has a lot of counter spells, but if they get under you, it's tough. And this gives you a little bit of counterplay, which is kind of nice, like how to catch up, how to reverse a situation. If say a Minsk and Boo gets in play and starts doing something, if a One Ring resolves and you need to be able to sort of shut it down there, like this.
It says all abilities, so One Ring's an interesting example because it would lose the triggered ability in the upkeep too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they're not drawing 13 cards, I think you take
Oh, it's
that,
still
you know?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like triggering the first Boo token also just shuts down everything
Everything.
on Minsk and Boo.
If you hit the Jitte, they don't even get more Jitte counters.
Yeah.
Like it's very mean against a bunch of really good cards.
Yeah.
Do you think this could get that? I wouldn't be surprised if it just shows up in Jeskai. Like, I don't think this is a Merfolk exclusive card. Do you think it's a Merfolk exclusive
The
card?
3/2 stat line without evasion does make me a little hesitant.
Sure.
Like, we're not even playing Hull Breacher in those decks.
Sure.
Just because it's just like it trades with like a Wild Nacatl or whatever.
Right. Okay.
But this card is mean. Like, this card is mean enough that if you are the more tempo-oriented versions of Jeskai, like, think something Matthew Greer would play.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I could see this card ruining some days.
Yeah, I'd play it in blue-white tempo if I didn't just get run over with that deck and felt bad about it.
I got a list I can ship
We'll
you. if you'd
revisit
like.
in 6 months or something.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to black cards, and we're going to start with Bitter Triumph. This is a 2-mana instant for 1 and a black. As an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card or pay 3 life, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Not a lot to say here.
Yeah.
It's very good. In some decks, discarding a card is actually an upside. It's not even additional cost. You're pretty happy to do that. And there are a lot of times in black that you are happy to pay life to kill creatures sort of ahead of the curve, like to skip on mana. Dismember is a very classic example. Also, a lot of the best removal in black right now, I want to say, is conditional. So it's you need to hit a certain mana value. You need to hit the combined power and toughness or something. This being unconditional and also hitting planeswalkers for the cost of 3 life, you're happy, or discarding a card, you're also pretty happy. I think this is probably one of the better removal spells they've printed in a while.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Like, what's that one that makes you lose 2 life and kills any
Infernal
creature?
Grass.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just Infernal Grass that can hit planeswalkers.
Well, it's also an instant spell. Blood Chief's Thirst,
Yeah.
being a sorcery and also conditional. Like,
The option to pay the life or discard a card is huge, too.
yeah. Or Planeswalker?
Yeah. Or planeswalker, exactly.
Or Planeswalker. I mean, I guess we can just move on. Wheeler.
Bloodletter of Aklazots. 1 black for a 2/4 vampire demon with flying. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. Parentheses. Damage causes loss of life. End parentheses. So this has a pretty goofy mana cost. It's a little prohibitive. But it's also just like a Blade Historian style card.
What do we do? Like,
What's the opposite of Ancient Tomb? Yeah.
no.
Dark
Close
ritual
it.
mana.
mana.
Ritual man.
It has ritual mana.
Oh, I like it. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a card that I look at and go, this can't be correct to play. And yet it will kill so many people. Like, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Like, I'm right there with you. Like, I don't have a home for this. I tried playing Demon Stomp you once, and I still feel burned.
Like,
Yeah, but you tried to play Demon Stompy Storm in my defense. It wasn't just mid-range Demon Stompy. Let's be real.
I could play this straight, like the only Demon Stompy version.
I want to play.
this does combo with Tendrils of Agony.
You see? Those are individual points of life loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this goes in the classic example
Oh
of
no, I'm putting this in that
4-mana demons, right? Yeah, you only need a storm count of like 5 to kill them.
That's exactly what that deck wants. Okay, fine.
I don't know. It's a card where I don't know if playing it is necessarily the like best strategic decision you can make. But if we're talking about the best strategic decisions to make, you wouldn't be playing mono black aggro. And so go nuts, because this will kill people.
Yeah.
You know, it's in that category of like, I'm not going to personally play it, but I'm definitely going to die to it like once or twice
yeah.
because I'll just not respect it. And
Well, you're gonna do the combat math and be like, okay, I'm at 13. They've got 5 power and toughness on the board, and then you're just dead.
yeah,
right?
I mean, for what it's worth, it does give black an ability to push more damage and subvert expectations.
Yeah.
which, like
They're gonna
is
kill you
not-
with Sign and Blood.
Yeah.
That's gonna do 4
Oh my
damage.
god.
Yeah, this is all talking my language. I guess I need to experiment with this card. I initially looked at it and I was like, "This is a trap." I looked at this card and it's like, "That's bait," but
Sometimes
I have
that's
to take
okay.
it. Yeah, I'm gonna take.
I mean,
it,
the
so
floor is it's just it attacks for 4.
Yeah, it's a
right?
4.
Yeah.
It doesn't block
Yeah.
for 4, which is a little whatever, but it survives Brazen Borrowers and
Yep.
Dealing
Yeah,
Freaks.
it blocks all of the idiot birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not gonna play it, but I'll die to it.
All right, Nelly.
I do love
This-
a 4-mana 2/4 stat line.
This card, however,
Yeah, no.
Jesus
What if
Christ.
they just gave Mesmeric Fiend flying and lifelink? It's Deep Cavern Bat for 1 and a black. A 1/1 bat with flying and lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it until this leaves the battlefield. So, yeah, I used to play a bunch of cards like this, where you get Thoughtseizes out of your creatures. There's like 2 or 3 others that cost 2 mana, and I probably will again. This is clearly the best one ever. I only ever did this in black aggro decks, like the mono black aggro, but
You didn't go black-white for Tide Hollow Sculler as well?
I mean, I have. That's another deck. If you're going to put white pips in your deck, you might as well play a good deck. Tidal Sculler is a good card.
Yeah.
And like this is a 1/1 instead of a 2/2, but it does have flying and lifelink, so possibly still fits in those
Is
decks.
it a missed opportunity that this is not a vampire bat, which has been printed before?
I'm sure that they considered making this a vampire, and we're just like, no, that we're giving the vampires enough.
So rude.
Yeah.
Oh, God. If this were a vampire, I don't think I would have smack talked vampires as subtly as. I mean,
Yeah.
it's this.
Yeah.
This is wild.
Do you think this card's strong enough that it sees some other homes besides just like mono black aggro? Do you put
we
it
don't
in
we
Sandy
don't play
B
a
or
lot of
something?
those these
I don't
days,
know.
though.
I'd play this in like a Mardu. I'd play this in maybe even like an Esper or Mardu initiative style deck.
Really?
Like
Okay.
this takes any card.
Yeah.
And it flies.
Yeah.
And it's even a
But the
main
stats are bad. Like it's a 2-mana
Yeah.
1/1.
with flying and lifelink.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this holds a GT pretty well.
Yeah.
This is the kind
And
of
it takes
card.
the initiative back kind of well because it's flying.
Yeah. This is the kind of card I actually don't hate playing this with in a skull clamp kind of deck too.
Sure.
Like you don't get the rip the card, trigger on the stack, get rid of it
Bullshit
or whatever.
against you,
But
yeah.
like, I don't know. This is a lot of really good words on a card.
Yeah. It's only
Yeah.
2 mana.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is a vampire. I'm gonna, unlike the last time I was wrong. Dusk Legion Serge Ant.
Huh?
I'd make a joke because that's my name.
Yes.
Sergeant.
There it is.
Right.
Never mind. 2 mana, 2/2 vampire soldier for 1 and a black. It has menace and an activated ability. 1 and a black, and sacrifice the sergeant. Each non-token vampire creature you control gains persist until end of turn, which is a returning mechanic that we haven't seen since original Innistrad? No, when was persist?
It came out in Lorwyn. Or,
Lorwyn,
no,
right.
not Lorwyn. The
Shadow
other-
Moor.
Thank you.
What was the...
You're thinking of Undying.
I'm thinking of Undying. I'm thinking of
Undying is-
Undying.
yeah.
Thank you, because
Yeah,
that was the one that came with the
We
vampires.
did see some persist cards in some of the Modern Horizons products.
Yeah.
But
So, persist is when it dies, if it did not have a -1/-1 counter on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1. This creature is fantastic, specifically in the tribal deck. As Wheeler was mentioning before, it is lacking a density of like good utility cards, specifically around 2 mana. So this does a great job of being an on-curve threat while also adding a lot of ability to sort of push and survivability into the mid and to late game, where you can just aggressively swing out, and if they block, you just crack it and you rebuild your board afterwards. And some vampires have some pretty handy little ETBs, so you can even get additional upside, and it also gives you wrath protection, provided they're not playing something like Farewell or Terminus, but I don't think a lot of people are playing too many wraths.
The one downside is that vampires in general are a little more frail than you would expect. Like, there are a lot of X1s.
Yes.
And so this isn't
Your
necessarily
poor Danto
saving.
Vanguard.
Yeah, much like the Charismatic Conqueror before it, this is it's a 2-drop, right? It's a 2-drop with a relevant combat ability and something that might pop up and be worthwhile to include. But the floor is that it's a 2-drop
Yep.
in your vampire deck. And again, it's from the Vampire Commander deck. You should play it in your Vampire Canlander deck. And that's it.
That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Wheeler, next card.
Preacher of the Schism, 2 and a black for a 2/4 Vampire Cleric with Death Touch. Whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, you create a 1/1 white vampire token with lifelink. And whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks while you have the most life or you are tied for the most life, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So this is a card where it's not doing... Typically, I'd recommend people avoid cards like this because it's not doing what you want all the time.
Sure.
Right? But we're talking about vampires here. This is a 3-mana... This is a 2/4 with a relevant ability, Death Touch, right? So it's a pain to block. It's a pain when it's blocking, and it survives Bolt. And it's got both Ancient 2 mana, do it with me, and it's got Ritual mana, do it again. So
Choreographer Wheeler, hard at work.
So if you're not making vampire tokens, which again, Vamps is a deck that has a bunch of lifelink and draining kind of effects, you're at least drawing cards at the cost of 1 life, which is pretty okay. So it's just got, like, you can kind of ignore that first block of text and be okay with this card. And sometimes that first block of text pops up. So I think it's okay. It's a card where if this wasn't a vampire, heck, even if it was like a merfolk, I would probably be like, nah, don't do it. But because it fills this role for that archetype, then
I was going to say, yeah, this is maybe the sad state of the deck when you're like, oh yeah, this is an auto-include.
Yeah.
Because your 3 drops, which is normally the most competitive slot, right? That's where you
Yes.
want all killer, no filler. And you're like, this is an upgrade.
It's a new card.
Yep.
It's a rare from a set in 2023. It's probably going to be better than like your Gruuldraz Assassin or whatever, you know?
Poor little buddy.
That Gildred Assassin art is incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
That's the one with the dagger, right? They're like,
Yeah.
all right, Ellie.
Okay, sorry. I like that card a lot too. It's time to talk about Souls of the Lost. 1 and a black for a star/star+1 spirit. As an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card or sacrifice a permanent, and it has Fathomless Descent. Souls of the Lost power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to the number +1. I don't know if this was our first Fathomless Descent, but the Descent ability word transcends a little bit and has a few different variants. Anyways, this one counts the number of permanent cards in your graveyard if we didn't already have one like that. That's all it means. So, interesting 2-drop. I don't immediately know where I would put it. I love spells that allow you to cheat on mana by including a different cost, right? And it's only to cast, so if you want to, like, you know, whip this back into play with one of your reanimated cheap things, that works.
Old Mimeoplasm combo.
Old Mimeoplasm combo. Now, okay, so if you are, if you're, you know, Angel of Glory's rising into reanimating, whatever. Like,
Oh,
you know,
sorry,
this is
I got a
cheaper.
call from 2010.
2012. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. No, I don't know immediately where to put this. Although, like, it might be kind of sweet in mono black aggro just because you play so many.
What do you got? Dredge or
dumb
something?
one-drop
I
creatures
mean,
with
Dredge is the only reasonable place
Yeah.
that I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
but I do want to get ahead of
I
this
forgot the Dredge.
because I saw people talking about this online.
Okay. Oh, all right. He's got to change his posture here to educate. All right.
Come in real close.
Yeah.
It's not Tarmogoyf. It's never going to be Tarmogoyf. You know why Tarmogoyf is so good?
Because you can play it early.
Lots of reasons.
a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
But because it gets better with Brainstorm, Lightning Bolt, Force of Will, Swords to Plowshares, you know, cheap non-creature spells that you can play to set up or progress your game plan while your only card is Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
Right?
It holds the whole board by itself.
While this does count lands, like fetches and all that jazz and other creatures, it's like at the end of the day, it's just a vanilla big idiot. And like Tarmogoyf is just a vanilla big idiot, but it's a vanilla big idiot that gets better with your Brainstorms and Ponders and Lightning Bolts and Thought Seizes and Duresses.
Yeah.
So yeah, this ain't Goyf. They never are. It's different. Doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Just means that you're not going to play this in any blue, black, green X deck.
I was literally about to say, but what about in a blue, black, green X deck with self-build?
Dredge, if you cast this and you sacrifice your Dakmor salvage, you're going to feel like you're a million IQ,
yeah,
right?
we're just like pitch. I mean, for Dredge, having a discard outlet that that can't be countered could be pretty helpful.
Cost, yeah.
Having a sack outlet that can't be countered, pretty helpful. It's a black card for your Icarid, and that's a deck that like gives you a weird line where like if you have anger in your bin, you could just reanimate this, and especially off Luris.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. Is you could bring this back off Luris
Luris,
and just
anger.
hit them
Yep.
for like 80.
Yeah. You really like. I do not see this as a mid-range card.
Yeah.
So do play it in Dredge.
That's what I was going to say. Like, if you're doing weird graveyard shenanigans, if you're really dedicated into it, I actually love that Luris Anger line. I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
I don't know who else is playing Anger
Don't
in
be-
2023, though.
It's just Dredge. Yeah. And maybe like, I mean, I could call up one of those Hermit Druid combo players from 2010 if you want.
All right. Next up is me with Stalactite Stalker. This is a one. You know what? I'm sorry, Nelson. Why don't you? I'm going to give this one to you, and I'll take the last one. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. You don't mind missing
Yeah.
variants.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Stalactite Stalker. 1 black for a 1/1 Goblin Rogue. Goblin and Rogue. With Menace. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this. But wait, we're not even done. It also has 2 and a black. Sacrifice this. Target creature gets -X/-X at the end turn, where X is Stalactite Stalker's power. So there's this card from a long time ago that's sort of in the family of this card. Started the family tree called Chronometon. And
Oh my God.
it's just 1 mana for a 1/1 generic, and it pay 1 and tap it, and it gets a +1/+1 counter. And then they gave black one called Cruel Sadist, where it got bigger every turn if you tapped and paid mana, but it also hurt you. But for like 6 mana, it would like take its counters off and hurt a creature. Now this one, you don't have to pay more mana to make it bigger. You don't have to tap it to make it bigger. It has Menace, and it just gets bigger every turn as long as you hit a fetch land or one of your other creatures traded in combat. Any of all the ways that we have to descend, right? All it asks is that you descended somehow, which means a permanent was put into your graveyard from anywhere. You can even surveil a permanent into your graveyard or mill yourself, and then it gets bigger. And it has Menace, and it even sacrifices itself to trade off with another creature later. I'm definitely going to be trying it in mono black aggro. Multicolored goblins, probably excited about it. Rogues isn't usually an archetype, but you know, this is what this card's playable. This card is playable in Canadian Highlander, and you know, if you are the rogue player out there hoping to make rogues happen, this is one more card that you're gonna have in your arsenal for when that finally occurs for you in 2040.
I don't know if this is coming across on the camera, but Nelly's eyes are sparkling right now. Like he's almost got tears in his eyes.
I like this goblin.
I don't think I've seen him this excited in 5 years. Like-
This is a good card.
This is genuinely a good card.
yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's genuinely.
Wait, hold on. And, but
No, I got nothing. It's genuinely a good card.
Sometimes they print good cards that Nelson also wants to play.
yeah, good cards for mono black aggro.
Yeah.
What?
We have Shieldred in this.
There's no downside.
There's 2. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
and the last card that we are going to talk about today is Tarian's Journal. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact for 1 and a black. Tap, sacrifice another artifact or creature to draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. And then 2 and tap and discard your hand. Transform the journal into Tomb of... Please help me out, Wheeler.
Aklozots.
The Tomb of Aklozots. It's a legendary land, subtype cave. Not really going to be relevant for us, but that's a new subtype for lands. Taps to add a black, or you may cast a card pardon me. You may cast a creature card from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it and a vampire in addition to its other types. Finality counter, which we haven't covered right now, is if something enters play with a finality counter on it and it would die, exile it instead. However, you can bounce it back to your hand. If it's removed from play in other ways, the finality counter is not removed. This is really neat. This is really cool. Probably the first thing I'm thinking of, I wanted to say Aristocrats. You can only sack once with it. Oh, no.
You can sacrifice the front side lets you sacrifice one thing per turn.
Yeah,
Is
you
that what
tap,
meant,
you
just
tap
once
it. Yeah,
per
but
turn?
it's not a free sack outlet,
No,
stuff like that.
no, it's not
All right,
like
let me
a-
talk about
it's
decks
just
that I'm a little bit more familiar with piloting. I would absolutely play this in my recurring nightmare decks. If you're looking for sack outlets and stuff like that, it slices and it dices in that it has the ability to give you value on the front side to fill your graveyard. If you're looking for sort of like a fair or engine style recurring nightmare, like a reanimator package as opposed to an instant win like the other side. And the ability to sort of get more gas in the later game, say you're slowing down, you just want to fill your bin, whatever. The transform and giving you the ability to regrow threats from your graveyard is fantastic. And if you have blink effects like a Restoration Angel, you can actually negate the downside of the finality counter. But even then, if you're playing ETB creatures in sort of that like mid-range grindy artifact thing, you're fine even if they do get exiled because you're getting that value once they come into play. So I like this card in that sort of shell, and I'll let the other people speak to some more of the applications.
Yeah, I think this card has a lot of potential. I'm not sure which decks it would go into.
Yeah.
Vampires, maybe? Honestly, vampires?
I mean,
it says vampire on the other side, but
Yeah,
you
it
don't
does.
You don't have to play every card that has the word vampire.
I know, but this card's kind of good, and it says vampire on the other side. It's kind of a good card.
sacrificing an artifact's not bad.
Yeah, like
You
is
know.
this maybe getting into welder? Gives you a little extra protection in case they kill your welder.
No.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'd talk about playing it in Welder.
Yeah.
This is a card where it's like if you got a flex slot and you are something that looks to sacrifice cards for like grindy value, maybe you can consider it.
Not Aristocrats then.
I don't know. Aristocrats, these decks are also they're all filled to the brim already.
Sure.
Kind of have to be pretty outstanding to find a home. But maybe the like black red welder reanimator deck.
Oh yeah.
Aristo scraps
Yeah.
Maybe this
or
makes sense.
junkyard or whatever you want to call it.
Now, interesting to note, this one, unlike the other two we talked about, is not an artifact on its opposite side.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
What's the
subtype
deal with
cave.
that?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. What happened?
So I like that less, but that's still kind of cool.
Shout outs to the templating of this ability on the back, so the cave ability to reanimate stuff. Other cards like Volrath Stronghold comes to mind, and there's a few in this sort of category where you're getting stuff back once a turn from your graveyard. They often target, and so your opponent can ruin you even if they just have a single green pip and they're scavenging use. But this one just says you get to this turn cast a creature spell. It doesn't say you have to pick which one as you're activating the cave, and it doesn't even have to be a card that's in your graveyard yet. It's just now you have the ability to cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn.
It gives you the proactive priority of like Luris
Yeah.
as well, and that you have all the agency in what happens there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. The backside, it's pretty sweet if you're using it, but like I'm trying to figure out which deck both gets value from the front and looks to transform it.
I mean, sort of like I said, that my Abzan recurring nightmare deck, there's not a lot in there in the Aristocrats. That's fine. Shall we call it there for part one?
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We really do appreciate it. A reminder, we'll be back with part two, which is going to be the remaining colors as well as artifacts and lands. Everything we do is brought to you by you, their support over at the Patreon, over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. I've been Serge, joined by a Wheeler,
What up?
a Nelly.
I was here.
Shout out to James on Tech, and thank you to our editing staff, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.